Now that SharePoint is installed on your server, it's time to go look at Central Administration and what it offers. There are different components of Central Administration, and they're grouped into different categories, and we'll take a peek at that here in a minute. One section is Application Management. That's where you create, delete, configure your web applications, your site collections. It's where you'll manage your service applications and the databases associated with the web applications. System Settings. Perform server-side-wide tasks. This is everything that has to do with the farm. It's going to configure your servers, your email, text messaging, farm management. This is farm-wide. SharePoint offers several different ways that you can monitor your servers. There are tools that they offer. You've got the Health Analyzer. You've got Timer Job Data and Management. And it offers several different reporting options for different components of the farm. You also have the Backup and Restore section. Performs just like it says. It performs backups and restores. You can view the history and status of any running backups. And it also includes granular backup. Security. User security, general security, information policy, anything that has to do with security you're going to find in this category. You can manage accounts using service accounts. That also includes managing your service accounts. Upgrade and patch management. License information, enterprise features, those are features that are available to the farm. Any patching information, upgrade and database status. And then you have general application settings. It's used for configuring external service collections, info path, site directory, SharePoint Designer, what permissions you're going to allow for that, your search services, reporting services, and content deployment. And then finally, you have the configuration wizards. Those are wizards that will walk you through the process step by step to create and configure various service applications. Central Admin was created when you initially installed SharePoint, but before you can move forward with utilizing SharePoint, there are some things that need to be configured. You need to add any service accounts into your Managed Accounts library. Configure your incoming and outgoing email. Outgoing is key. Without outgoing email, you can't send alerts on lists and libraries. Incoming is optional. Enable diagnostic logging and usage analysis. You need to start the search service and create your service application. And finally, you need to create web applications and sites for the business to consume. Post-installation. Central Admin was created when you installed SharePoint. Before you can really use SharePoint, you must complete some additional tasks. They include enabling incoming and outgoing email. Without outgoing email enabled, administrators and users will not receive alerts on their content or on the system. Enable logging and usage analysis. The diagnostic logging is utilized for the event log, the system events that occur and how they're going to be logged and at what level they'll be logged in the event log. Usage analysis refers to usage, just like it says, usage analysis. It's going to go out and analyze the usage on the sites and provide reports accordingly. Start the search service and create the search service application. Without this, users will not be able to search for content within SharePoint or external. Start the search service and also create the search service application. This is key. Without this, users will not be able to search for content within SharePoint or externally. And finally, create web applications and sites. Okay, so now let's go take a peek at Central Administration. To do that, we're going to click Start on the menu bar, All Programs. There's a category Microsoft SharePoint 2010 Products, and you're going to select SharePoint 2010 Central Administration. And those different categories and groupings that we just talked about are all displayed here on the left side on the Quick Launch bar. You'll see Application Management, System Settings, Monitoring, Backup, Security, Upgrade Migration, General Application Settings, and Configuration Wizards. On the right in the middle section of the home page of Central Administration It gives you some links for those categories, but it's not giving you everything for system settings, for instance. There's many more options that you can set. This is just going to give you the most common ones available. So let's take a peek at application management. When I click on that, it takes me to the application management page, and this has everything to do with the web applications and down. The thing to keep in mind is a web application, it's just an empty container when you create one. It's got the URL, it's just an empty container that contains no sites. And then you would create site collections to put into those web applications. And here is the area where you would manage those different site collections, and we'll be doing that here shortly. Service applications, these are the different services that are available to SharePoint. For instance, if I click Manage Service Applications, it takes a minute to build the first time it goes in there. These are the two that were created by default on the installation. But I have an option to create many more. I have Access Services, the BDS, which is the Business Data Connectivity Service, Excel Services, Search Service, and so on. And below that you have databases. Each web application is associated with at least one database, and this is where you would come in to configure that. And we'll be going into more detail at another time. System settings, same thing. Anything that has to do with the server, this is server-wide. It's manage the services on the server, manage the servers in the farm if you have more than one server. This is where we'll configure email and text messages, farm management, the features that are available for the users to consume that are farm-wide, and monitoring, the health analyzer, timer jobs, reporting. These are all the different components for that. Backup and restore, just what it is. This is where you go to manage your backup and restores, to do backup and restores. And with SharePoint 2010, you now can use granular backup. You can export a site or a list. And security. Users, the farm administrators group. This is key. This is the group that has Uber permissions in a sense. It's the one that has all the farm-wide permissions. However, by default, it does not have permissions into the individual site collections. Reject distribution group, specify web application user policy. These are all the security involved with that. Managed accounts, which we'll be doing here in just a second. And you can also manage your farm administrators group, specify web application user policy, which a lot of people don't understand, but that gives whomever is designated as that needs permission across everything within that web application. If you add them to that group, you can either deny or allow them to have permissions within the site collections. And all of your general security and information policies are performed right here from security. Upgrade and migration. This is where you would convert from farm license type. If you have the standard license and then you upgrade to the enterprise license, this is where you would go in to enter that license. Or if you're running the free version, the foundation, and you purchased the SharePoint server license, you could come in here and upgrade it from there. And general application settings. External service connections, info path, site directory, what permissions you're going to allow the users to have with SharePoint Designer, your search, reporting services, and content deployment. And then finally, configuration wizards that'll walk you through creating service applications. Okay, the first two things we're going to do are managed accounts and configuring email, but let's discuss managed accounts first. SharePoint 2010 uses managed accounts to utilize for different services and applications within the farm. So you can go in and you can enter these into a list with the passwords, and then when you want to utilize them, as you create web applications and start service applications, you just select that account. You don't have to worry about typing in the password because all of that is managed by SharePoint. It's no different than adding an item to a list or a library. It's just simply typing in the fields and it'll take it from there. Configuring email. SharePoint outgoing email. Without this enabled, users won't be able to get alerts. It also is used for task assignments. If I want to assign a task to a specific user, I could assign it and then they'll get an alert via email for that. Workflow status. any workflows, approval workflows, and so on, we'll use outgoing email. And access requests. You can set your site up so that users can request access to it, and you would need outgoing email for that to be enabled. On the other side is incoming email. There are certain lists and libraries that are email enabled so that users can send content to those lists and libraries. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is configure our managed accounts. So to do that, we would go and click on the Security link on the left Quick Launch bar. Under General Security, you're going to see an option, Configure Managed Accounts. Right now, the SharePoint Administrator account is in there because that was the account that was used to install SharePoint. But we're going to add a couple of other ones. And to do that, we're going to click Register Managed Account. Type in the service account name, along with the password. You can enable automatic password change, so it'll determine if the password is due to expire and automatically change it for you. You will also notice that you can start notifying by email. It'll start notifying the administrator by email so many days before it's ready to change, so they're aware of it. And then go ahead and tell it OK. Oops. It helps if you type in the right password. Okay. And now you see we have 2 accounts in here. I'm going to go ahead and add another one. Tell it OK. That is the account that we will be using when we start our search service application. It'll be specific for that. We won't have to worry about typing the password or anything, or if somebody else is administering it or giving out the password to other individuals, because SharePoint will manage that for you. So now that we've registered our managed accounts, our service accounts within SharePoint, let's go ahead and configure our email. The first thing we're going to do is configure outgoing email settings. The outbound SMTP server, you'll need to get with your Exchange team to find out what that is within your company. For our purposes, we're going to type in smtp.sharepointsvr.com. And again, your Exchange team will provide that for you. SharePoint will use the from address and the reply to address in the alerts and emails that are sent out to the users. And for our purposes, we're going to use intranet_admin@sharepointsvr.com. And we're going to use the same for the reply to address. For your purposes, you might not want it to say intranet admin. You might want it to say SharePoint or something along those lines, something that identifies users will be able to tell that this is an alert coming from SharePoint. You want to make sure that you select an email address that is easily identified by users that this is coming from SharePoint or that the alert is coming from SharePoint. Character set. It's UTF-8 by default. This encoding is the default and we don't need to change it here. Go ahead and click OK. Next, we're going to configure incoming email settings. Go ahead and click on. We haven't enabled the SMTP service on this server, so we're getting this message. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. For your purposes, you will have SMTP installed on the server. This is the page that you will use to configure your incoming email settings. There are multiple options that you can choose from. The first one is, do you want to enable sites on this server to receive email? If you select yes, then it's across the board. All the web applications and sites will have that capability. We're going to go ahead and just walk through the process. and click Yes for enabling incoming email. For the settings mode, do we want it to be automatic or advanced? Advanced mode is necessary only if you're not using the SMTP service for receiving incoming email. If you're using the advanced mode, you'll need a drop folder, which is a folder where the email is going to be dropped, and that's configured within the SMTP service. Directory management. It allows SharePoint to create AD contacts for the libraries. You can't send content to a library or a list if there's not an email address associated with that. So that's where that would come into play. And then an AD container for the aliases. In the Directory Management Service, we're going to allow SharePoint Directory Management Service to create distribution groups and contracts. So we're going to click Yes. And then you'll have to have an organizational unit configured for this, and that would be set up by your Exchange administrator. For instance, and they'll provide the format for you, the OU, and this is the format that it would be put in, OU equals WSS lists, DC, which is the domain controller, SharePoint SVR for our purposes. Again, you would get this from your Exchange team. And then DC, the other component of that, for the fully qualified, would be COM. And then you will also need to get from your AD team, you'll get the Active Directory container. They're the ones that will create that. For the SMTP mail server for incoming email, this is the name of the SharePoint server that will be receiving the email. And as we scroll down, you're going to get several other options. Accept messages from authenticated users only. It depends on how secure your environment is and what the purpose is of the SharePoint deployment as to whether or not you would choose yes or no here. And it's self-explanatory. Allow creation of distribution groups from SharePoint sites. This allows site owners to create email aliases for their libraries. And in the options you have below, distribution group request approval settings, you have create new distribution group, change distribution group request approval settings. These are the areas that are going to need specific approval before they'll be allowed. Do you want to have an approval process to create the new distribution group so it doesn't just automatically happen? Change the distribution group email address. Is that going to require approval? Change the group title, description, or to delete the distribution group. The create and delete are always key. You normally want to make sure that those are in place so things don't get out of hand. Down a little bit further, the incoming email server display address. If you're in a list or a library that's email enabled, this is what's going to be displayed to the user that's managing that list or library. So when they create an incoming email address for that site, this is what's always going to be after the @ symbol. So it would be my list. It could be anything along the lines of whatever that library is associated with, you'll want to give it a description on the user side of it. But it'll always be like my documents or Michelle's documents. It could be HR tasks at sharepoint.com, etc. Email drop folder. This is where SharePoint goes out and checks periodically for incoming email messages and then via the SMTP service, and then it processes those and then puts them in the appropriate SharePoint lists or libraries that are email enabled. And then when you're done, go ahead and click OK. But for our purposes, since we don't have our SMTP enabled, we're going to click Cancel.